All right, so let's get this one rolling. And so there's our preview here. Sorry about the coziness, but it's a good shot. All right. Hi, everyone. It's Hector from CochiseCountyVoice. A special guest today in my Benson kitchen table is Benson's vice mayor. She was just actually selected as vice mayor, but she is running for office. So let's hear it. Introduce yourself and let us know.
Thank you. My name's Cindy Tapia, and I've been in the San Pedro area for 5 generations now. My kids are 6th generation. So Benson means a lot to me. So wanted to serve on city council because of parks and recs for my girls mainly. But as you become, as you are on city council longer, you see that there are other important areas that you need to address as well. So I think I had one idea, but I soon saw that there was other things that needed to be addressed, and so that's why I'm still on city council. I think I can help in those ways.
So what was that first year that you were elected?
I was appointed in 2022 in January, and then I was elected in November 2022.
The following election. And was that in 2020? Was that the first time you had entered politics in any way? So who else was in that race? Do you remember?
Seth and Levi.
So they were both in. So you guys entered sort of the political realm at this roughly the same time. Mm-hmm. All right. So you have gone through an interesting time, for the Benson City Council, especially the last couple of years. This year, we're in a special, we had a special recall election. Mm-hmm. A very unusual thing to happen. It takes a lot of effort to recall elections. It takes actually a lot of effort to make them successful. Mm-hmm. But those things happened. A certain number of residents were upset enough to launch a recall of, I think it was 4, right? Mm-hmm. 3 of them were successful. Mm-hmm. And those council people are now serving, but their term is super short. Mm-hmm. Essentially only a few months. Yeah. And some very important things have transpired at the end of the fiscal year, which just happens to end also in July. One of the things that happened is that the budget was passed, and so these council people really did not have a chance to craft a lot of what was happening there. So tell me a little bit about, we're going to launch right into budget. See, that was easy. So we're going to launch right into the budget.
Can I say something real quick about the recall? I wasn't one of the ones recalled.
Yeah, right.
So I do want to say I think the reason was because I did keep that line of communication open with the public. And we don't always agree on things, myself and the public, but I'm here to represent those that I agree with and those that I don't agree with. And I think because the line of communication was open, I believe that's why I wasn't.
And so I think you were the most visible, certainly, and I think the feedback from people was that you were more attentive, and and normally, like I say, a lot of whether there wins or fails, it's typically applied to the whole council. Mm-hmm. So you were spared a little bit, and you were not part of that recall. Mm-hmm. You were just not a target, so it wasn't like they didn't make it or anything. So I think that there was that response, and so you are. It was a fair criticism, I think, that people had of these of the recall effort, that it would be a very foreshortened. Mm-hmm. And then in a way that it would obstruct just the regular business at the end of the year. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure it did that, but also, again, sort of ineffectual or ineffective council members just because they're inexperienced and they came in at the very end of the process. Yeah. And then now, of course, Mr. Boyle has to run, immediately.
Yeah. So, I guess every person had to decide what was best for them and what they thought they were passionate about. Yeah. And to be honest with you, we all were being considered for recall, right? All of us were. But I felt like I also took actions, like I spoke up at ADEQ. I made comments. So I think there was action seen, not just words, but action seen why I was also spared. So
and I don't think it would have taken very much, actually. Mm-hmm. Not that your efforts were little, but just you were more visual, and I think that was the response. And folks, of course, one of the things was that they wanted to hear about these things earlier. Their response would have been the same. Their reaction to whatever was being built would have been exactly the same. They just wanted to know about it earlier, and they wanted to feel like they were like I said, like the council was more candid, and like you said, like you were just out there and participating. The criticism was going to be there. That was just inevitable. But as you said earlier, there's so many things about the city that we now have to concern ourselves, because what led to this recall, the ADI plan is gone, or they're going to build it somewhere else. And so now we're stuck with basically a community that was pretty divided. I don't want to say half and half or anything like that. I don't know. Both sides were very vocal, and it continues. People are still pretty sore.
Well, and I think both sides have a reason to be upset. I have an experience of health, so health and wellness was on my mind, right? Concern. Other people who maybe needed a job, and those were going to be jobs available, they have the right to be upset with that. And we have the responsibility to find other jobs to replace those for them. So I think the concerns that people have on both sides are legitimate. And we need to listen to both sides, and we need to, protect the health and safety of our constituents, but we also have to protect them financially and find good economic feasibility for them to remain here in town. Like, I want my kids and grandkids to live here,
sure,
but they have to be prosperous in order to do so. So, I think both sides have their reasons for being upset, and we have to address both.
Yeah. Well, and it is a balance of both. Now, again, now we're left with with dealing with our regular issues, which are there. We have plenty of that had nothing to do, with the plan. And one of those, of course, like you say, look, we need to create the growth of the city, whether people like it or not, is kind of dependent. That's what cities are. They're dependent on growth, and at the very least, if not actual growth, there has to be activity within it to both generate, all the things that make cities work. And to be frank, it's revenues, it's taxes, it's people coming in and using your services, and it's again creating a thriving environment where not only what makes it successful is an environment where people do all their things. They do their dry cleaning, their shopping, they get their gas, they buy their clothes. When you get a robust set of businesses, you can't be a shop town. Right. To me, it was sort of this fantasy we had, because the idea of that someone's going to come in and open a factory with 2,000 people in it, those days are gone. Even these gigantic data centers are only employ dozens of people, and the likelihood is that ADI would have only locally employed not just that many dozens. Right. And so what we really need is a city that that is diverse in all kinds of things. Now, how do we create that, Brian? How do we do it? Now, one of the things that's happened is that now we're very aware of where industrial zones are. Everybody suddenly knows there's an industrial zone nearby, and which is good. But and those, if you're concerned about those areas, those you can change those, but the process to do that is very lengthy. So, how do we create an environment now that we don't have the ADI type? How do you feel we create an environment to attract businesses?
Right. So I think we're blessed by the location we're at. Right. We have all these freeways and interstates intersecting. We have the railroad, and we do have an airport that I think has huge potential. So I think we're lucky in that, and I think that we'll grow possibly even faster than some of us would like, because we like the small town charm. But we do need growth to survive. That's the fact of it. And so we have to have a little bit of everything in order for that to survive. But we definitely need new investments, new businesses, and new life, and even people who come here to visit and find attractions that we do have here. So we do need to have like a diverse set of businesses and opportunities and activities that we offer. And so again, we're blessed in the location. But now it's the city and our responsibility to find those best businesses and investments to come here, or even like the state to invest in our infrastructure so that we can develop the airport with its potential there. So that's our job, is to create that atmosphere where businesses can come here and can be successful. And I think light industry is one of them. Those heavy industry areas, we have a general development plan that we're going over. So what do we say can be in those heavy industry areas? We obviously don't want one that can be harmful to our constituents, but I think there's a balance there, right? In other opportunities that can be there, that can be successful, and don't cause that grave harm that potentially could with the previous one.
Yeah, well, there's a huge range, even within both of whatever both of our industrial designations are. There's a huge range of businesses that can move in, but there's there are very few that were at the scale of API. That we should really talk about that's the case. If you can't compare a local fabrication shop to a billion-dollar part of a billion-dollar company, which is what they were.
Agreed, and which is why I have some stuff coming to council, so I don't really want to talk about the particulars, but I think the inconsistency of our P&Z commission, where the Maverick sign came through city council, but something like ADI didn't come through the council. That's a disparity there, and that's not consistent. So I think that needs to be in consideration, which one could have the most impact positively but also negatively. And those things that can be higher impact negatively, I think should come through council. So and they have the option to do that, and so it was just strange to me that one did and one didn't.
Well, and that's where that line was where people were alleging some illegality. Of course, that's been settled. So and also the people, I think the expectation, of course, was that that somehow, like the city isn't, or not the expectation, but the one of the responses was that the city was not necessarily involved in attracting businesses, but that's not necessarily the case. I mean, we, as you say, we set up an attractive city to lure potential businesses and families and anything that will want to move, because it's a beautiful place.
Right.
So we do actively do that, and we do that through the amenities. You mentioned the airport, a great amenity for a city. The more that you can take advantage of that, the better off that connection will be. And of course, there are plans to move industrial businesses in that direction, and those areas are zoned out there. It's just a matter of getting businesses out there. But we don't have real good access to that airport right now. That would be nice to get help with that. So amenities is the way that you lure. When a CEO says, "Oh, I want you to relocate to this town," and you look up the town and you're like, "Wow, man." You want some amenities. You want to know that there's things for your family to do, for yourself to do. You want the schools to be running well, and all of those things require that we be set up for it. That we have those things. Like you say, that we have fun things for people to do. We have an airport. We have a community pool and a community center that is thriving with events. All of those things are amenities, and also like maybe a golf course, an amenity. All of these things that make the whole of the city better. And I think that they can. I think that you can have a town that grows and has, and is active without losing its charm. But it does take effort, because it's really cultural. I think if you lose the culture of your town and you essentially sell it out, then you will lose it. You'll see that it's always going to be for the interest of money and not for the interest of your community. But I think there are ways to make the town more adhesive, and as it grows, to have people not feel so put out, by that. But stagnation is the preservation of culture. I don't think has to do with stagnation. You know what I mean? I think that just kills a town, and then and then you have nothing.
Of course, and you know, I think people come and move here and they love it because of the culture that we currently have.
Yeah.
So we want them to bring
And it's history,
into
too.
our culture and our history. We have tons of history here, right? So we want them to come and blend into ours. Of course, they might have great ideas that we might listen to, but we do want to keep our culture and our history here, and we want them to learn about it. And we do need other families to come in, and we do want that growth, right? Speaking of the airport, I do think that we need more growth there.
Yeah.
I think businesses can come out there. I was a flight nurse, and so we use that kind of fuel. So even just the fuel that we've offered has increased the performance of the airport and less subsidy from the city. So I think we need to continue that. The golf course it has been an issue, right?
Yeah.
But I do think there are good things about the golf course, okay? Troon, for one, has improved the greens, okay? We'll just start with the good. But it is costing the city of our size with our budget too much. That has to change. We have given feedback to Troon, you know, and I think they've taken some, and I think they haven't taken a lot, but a lot of what was occurring was deferred maintenance, right? So I feel like we've done that now. Now it's time to show us what you can do, and we have a limited time for them to do that, right? But I also think they are trying to manage it like a traditional golf course. And golf courses throughout the states are having a difficult time as it is. And we are too small, economy-wise, population-wise, for that to sustain. And it's been clear, because it hasn't been able to, right? So I think we need to look at it as a recreation center, event center, things like that, with a golf course. And I think those events need to go there. I just told our staff that I think every opportunity and every event that we have with the city needs to happen out there. The Lantern Festival has showed us that we can you know, it is net positive when that goes out there.
Yeah.
So why not do more of that, right? They had Frisbee golf, it earned us $5,000. Why not do more of that? You know, we can do glow in the dark golf. We've done fun runs, we've done bike races, we've done charity events. So why not create more of that? And if the restaurant can't survive with that, then maybe we need to lease that out to a business owner who is successful in doing so, and create more business that way, and create more business for the golf course. We have youth camps. Why aren't we developing our young and growing into that? Why isn't there a couple of nights and you know, youth nights, or you know, things like that? Why aren't there different groups, things like that? I know we've had a successful golfer at the high school, so it helps with that. But there is a lot of work that we have to do, and the subsidy can't be as large as it has been from the city. It has to change.
So essentially, that, you know, as you say, the subsidy is just too large. As an amenity, you always expect to have some sort of investment into it. You know, again, we don't get a return back from the pool. We don't get a return back from the softball fields or pickleball courts. No return there, money-wise. They're used extensively, so that's good. And so so there's always a cost for an amenity. You know, but I think when people see that number, you know, well over $500,000, even as low as the budget is going to be this coming year, it just feels like a lot, you know. Maybe because they don't hear the numbers for the other amenities, but I think one of the, you know, we need to be better at accepting that it's an amenity. You know, I'm not a golfer, so when you tell me you got to accept $500,000 amenity, I'm like, oh man. But again, you've just given me probably one of the best, just single, you know, linear explanations of the good things that the golf course is trying or attempting. You know what I mean? So that tells me that some of the other candidates weren't even too sure what was going on, you know, with it, and myself. And I think that's another thing that people feel, that they just have no clue why. Again, I think some folks would, if you explained it well, I think people would say, oh, you know, $200,000, $300,000 for an amenity, you know, like that. Like you say, we have the Lantern Festival there. We're going to use it for this. We're going to use it for that. You know what? That may be worth it, right? But that's a thing that you have to convince people of, because. Yeah, I think the golf course could be an amenity. Again, if it's run, you know, in a way that where people see the value. I just don't think a lot of people see the value. And I know there's a lot of golfers out there but a lot of the non-golfers just don't see it as a.
Because we don't advertise it well.
It's
so we
definitely
need
a communication
yeah,
thing.
we need to advertise it better. Troon, the management of Troon said that they thought the subsidy could get down to $200,000 to $300,000. So I asked for a plan of how they do that. I don't want to just hear talk anymore.
Yeah.
I want to see a plan, and I've asked for a work session. So I want to see action now. I don't want to listen to words anymore. I want to see action. And if they can't do it, then are they the person for us? Or are they the group for us? And also, like, there's different options. We have an 18-hole course, but some people don't have time for that. So I know it's not designed for a 9-hole, but can people go to 9 holes and come back? Or can we be a little bit creative and have it be the 1, 4, 6, 9, 18, where they end on the 18? I think there's different options, and we have to brainstorm what works for Benson.
So one of the issues for sure on communication again, and we'll talk a little bit about the city's communication. Some of the breakdowns, because it's a big complaint.
Mm-hmm.
It continues, right? And I don't know whether it's people's expectations or how they get their information. But there's definitely an issue there with getting the word out. And I think you're right. I think that it's a little bit of messaging issue with the golf course. And like I said, I like the things that you've said. I like the all of the things because people have. I've heard so many ideas.
Mm-hmm.
So many ideas. There's so many, and they're all pretty cool. To be able to implement any number of those would be an asset to the course, right? Because I've been to those events and they're very nice. The mountain biking thing that the hospital did I think that could be even developed into a nicer trail type thing. Mm-hmm. Again, a multi-use facility, all kinds of things that are that have been thought of. But again, it's just implementation. And even if Troon has had ideas, it's like the public hasn't heard that we're done
right.
What we're doing.
So let's say, for example, our movie in the park, it was rescheduled because of wind. I've asked for it to be moved to the golf course. So just seeing it and using it in a different fashion and more consistently is going to get more people to know that the golf course is there, more usage.
Yeah.
I'm like, have drinks available, water available, sodas available, beer available, just like we do for the Lantern Festival. And even the kitchen, they need to make a fun somewhere, have a couple food items, so it's very easy for the kitchen and some French fries and call it a day. And so I would like to start it now, And so that's something that we can do in a few months that we've already done the planning. It's just moving it to a different location. So it's not like it's going to be a big burden on the golf course, except for, getting the beer, water, sodas, and just a few things. I'm not even asking for a lot. Let's start there.
Well, so there's a lot of ideas. And again, maybe Troon has brought them up. I haven't heard them. And so whatever method they are using to relay that, it doesn't seem to be working.
Right.
And I want a solution. I don't want the golfers to lose their course. And Troon's numbers, they presented those numbers at the work session for the last meeting, and they said that year over year that there's more golfers, and that's great. It's when's that number going to be enough? Like you said, if at the end of this year, for example, you mentioned 250, 300,000, and I mentioned that too. If at the end of this year, the fiscal year next July, you were meeting and then you said, well, you know what, we didn't spend all our money. We didn't spend that money. Mm-hmm. I mean, that would be mind blowing. Mm-hmm. It shouldn't be, right? It shouldn't be.
Right.
Because that's the potential for all the budgets, because the budget is basically just the
top of the line of what the limit.
And so, and at any point you can come in under budget, and that would be a great success to come in under budget at the end of the year.
Yeah.
For everyone, it would relieve a huge amount of pressure to just be able to say, look, we promised this is the end of the year. I don't almost care what happens in between that, but of course there has to be progress, but but yeah, that would be a show of success, just because it's numbers, and I think people would understand it. And it's really what we're kind of concerned about. It's just that the number is too high.
Well, and we have fire and safety that we need, so that's a need, not a want. And so we need to use our money for things that we need, right?
Okay.
And to me, that is more important. I don't want to shut down the golf course, but that is more important. You know, we
And so
need
I
to
think
have
when
better
people see that
response.
trade-off, so let's talk a little bit about that.